Thank you for joining us again on From the Dust with Sarah Decker in part 3 of our conversation with Jonathan McCormick as we discuss what the millennium and the second coming might look like and how Heavenly Father is asking us to love recklessly without fear.
I just woke up one day and I've been thinking about how it's like there's all these things that God's taught me. I wrote a book at the time. It's a poem at the time I wrote called There Were No Books in the Beginning. I stand upon the hilltop garden. I'd have to pull it up to recite it, but I wrote a poem about it, and then I woke up the next day and I was reading my scriptures and God like basically said He said, Jonathan, this is the sealed portion I was talking about. This is exactly it. Is the part that I teach you. He said, think about it, Jonathan. If I were to publish a book with the sealed portion, that would go to all sorts of people that don't have faith. And I said that it was for the people who have faith. Anybody could read it if I just published it in a book. And I was like, and I remember it was just too much. It was like, really? For about a day or two, I was just walking around like, and at the time I had a friend who was a Christian friend, was not LDS. He was telling me all these things that God had taught him in the Bible. And I was like, that's not in the Bible. And he was like, well, God told me this, and he told me to read this and this, and then he told me it meant this. I said, yeah, but it's not in the Bible. Now, I knew it because I'd been taught it in Sunday school as a child, It was like, but God was teaching him. And I remember I shared it with him, and he was like, yeah, well, I don't have the Book of Mormon and all that. He says, but, it's like, he says, I get it. Maybe there's a sealed portion to every book, he said.
You're listening to another episode of From the Dust with Sarah Decker, a place to explore spiritual experiences and topics. And no, we are never alone.
Yes. Wow, I appreciate that. I had a very similar experience probably 3 years ago or so. I just woke up one day and I've been thinking about how it's like there's all these things that God's taught me. I wrote a book at the time. It's a poem at the time I wrote called There Were No Books in the Beginning. I stand upon the hilltop garden. I'd have to pull it up to recite it, but I wrote a poem about it, and then I woke up the next day and I was reading my scriptures and God like basically said He said, Jonathan, this is the sealed portion I was talking about. This is exactly it. Is the part that I teach you. He said, think about it, Jonathan. If I were to publish a book with the sealed portion, that would go to all sorts of people that don't have faith. And I said that it was for the people who have faith. Anybody could read it if I just published it in a book. And I was like, and I remember it was just too much. It was like, really? For about a day or two, I was just walking around like, and at the time I had a friend who was a Christian friend, was not LDS. He was telling me all these things that God had taught him in the Bible. And I was like, that's not in the Bible. And he was like, well, God told me this, and he told me to read this and this, and then he told me it meant this. I said, yeah, but it's not in the Bible. Now, I knew it because I'd been taught it in Sunday school as a child, It was like, but God was teaching him. And I remember I shared it with him, and he was like, yeah, well, I don't have the Book of Mormon and all that. He says, but, it's like, he says, I get it. Maybe there's a sealed portion to every book, he said. He says, because he was a Bible guy, he would not, God had to show him in the Bible, but God would show him these obscure things like you were talking about. So now, I always leave it open, like, could come a day, and we're going to see a seal, another volume coming out, but I really think, though, it's like you said, God has to tell us what things mean. It's like, and I kind of wonder if there's some tricks up the sleeve. It's like, yeah, I know you guys all thought it was going to be another book like this one, but, it's like, I can reveal it how I want to reveal it. Anyway.
I almost wonder because there's so much value in walking this journey with the Lord and getting to know these truths and have him expound upon these things through the Spirit. There's so much value in that journey. I sometimes wonder if once we've all learned that is when we'll finally it's like, okay, now here's the book, here's the actual book that that lays that all out, but you guys have already learned it because you did the work, you know? And he's like, oh, here you go. It's like, I sometimes wonder if that will be kind of the funny ending to the story. If he's like, there is actually a book about it, and here it is. Thank you so much for walking this journey with me. And now we can rejoice in the words of this book together because we know they're true because of what the Spirit has taught us, what God has taught us. And I think that'll be fun. It'll be
I think it has to be that way. I think it has to be. If it's a book of faith, like if it's a book that only can go to the faithful, well, then it has to come in a day when there's only the faithful can open it and see it. So those are people who already believed before, we're going to be reading it like, I knew it. I'll tell you another one that's fascinating to me. So like, I've come to see the second coming very differently. Now, given I still leave it open that God's going to like, where's the east? That way we're going to see him behind that cloud. And he's going to come behind the cloud. I'm totally open to that, but I don't think it's going to come until there are people who already see him with the eye of faith. And it's like, in fact, it says in Ether 12, it's like that they did see with their eyes that which they had seen with the eye of faith. A friend of mine calls it the sacred imagination. It's like, it's a place, it's your imagination, but God comes in and touches it. And it opens up and it is enlightened. And so I kind of wonder if we have to see for years with the eye of faith before he comes in the cloud. I've written several poems where I've talked about, I see him already coming in the cloud. It's like, that's what's so weird to me. Like I'm looking around, it's like, you guys don't see him? He's coming right now. And I can look back and realize, like, there's a scripture in the New Testament where he's talking to Peter, and he tells Peter, you will see in your generation the Son of Man coming in the cloud. It's like, well, what's a cloud? It's a covering. It's like, oh, so a covering means he's not seen. So you're going to see him, the one that's unseen, in the cloud. How are you going to see the one that's in the cloud? Well, because you're looking into the misty place where you have to squint and you begin to see him. And it's like, I'm totally okay too with, him coming over there in the cloud. And maybe that's what'll destroy the wicked finally, the end destruction. I don't know. But it really appears to me that it's been a promise for all ages. It's like otherwise, so God gave all these scriptures about the last days and him coming, a second coming. I'm going to come again. I came on the earth, but I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come to you. And it's like, so that scripture only applies to this tiny little segment of people who live in the very end when he comes. It's like, I look at it and I go, well, what if it's always been that way? What if he was saying, it's like, do you see me? Do you see me coming? It's like, and I think the people who have loved Christ in all ages were moved to do what they did because there was a second coming happening. They saw him in the cloud. He was imminent. That's why people through all ages, they've been saying, oh, I think it's close. I think it's close. Well, I think what they're really saying is, I see him coming in the cloud. I see him coming in the cloud, because he can't come to people. My impression is, given I'm going out on a limb a little bit, but my impression is that it's a faith thing. It's like, I don't think he really likes to appear to people who don't want to see him. But if there is a second coming, maybe that's what it'll be when he finally appears to those who don't want to see him, where he actually comes visibly. But I think we get off when everybody's like, you know what? I've been reading Daniel and I've got it pegged down. I think, it's like, it's all lined out. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the next 7 years, we're entering into the next 3.5 year period. We're entering it. This is it. And I've heard that for the last several decades. And it's like, it's like, I wonder if we kind of miss something when we're looking for the literal constantly, and we're not looking for, it's like the dawning of his presence upon our hearts and minds. Anyways.
One of the way that it was expressed to me years ago was that someone had said to me, the millennium can start whenever you start living it. And your own personal millennium can start whenever. And I pondered on that for a long time, months, and eventually had this very short vision, because I kind of started having a panic attack because I was like, literally, when the scriptures say being carried away by the Spirit, I was totally freaked out. It scared me half to death. Because it wasn't just like a small movie. It literally felt like I was surrounded by this vision, and it scared me. And so it didn't last very long. Fear has a way of doing that. So, but what I did see in those brief moments was incredibly impactful. And what it witnessed to me was that, yes, there is a personal millennium. There is a personal experience that we have. And I would say there's a personal, you know how in the Bible it says that the earth will roll together like a scroll. I do think that happens individually as well, as people realize that it's possible to interact with the other side of the veil. At least that's my understanding of that. And that all times are rolled together in one. I don't know. My understanding of that is happening now as well. And so we can have these personal millenniums and these personal experiences. But then he also said to me in that brief vision that, but it really will happen for everyone as well on a grander scale. So we can have our personal millenniums, and then we can but we will also experience a millennium. And what that taught me too is that the scriptures are true on many layers. They're true spiritually. They're true in our own lives. They're true on mass scale. Like when the scriptures say in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, it's true even for each prophecy. At least that's what the Spirit has kind of testified to me, is that it's true on each level, and it witnesses of itself spiritually and physically.
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, that's why I've left it open. It feels like I see the one so imminently. I feel like I want to shout the idea can come to us with a trumpet, but it doesn't mean that it's not. Just like I suppose that would have been true of the prophets who came before Christ, right? They saw Christ come. Didn't mean he wouldn't come into the world. In other words, they saw him before he actually came into the world. So he was a reality in their life before he was a reality in the world's life. So that fits the pattern. So.
Yeah. Well, I do want to give you an opportunity to direct people to where they can look at some of your poems and your writings. And I would appreciate if you would like to share where that can be found, where people can find you.
So you can go to thetracklesspath.com is my website. So the trackless, like a path without track, or like no tracks. So the trackless path, like a path in the woods, thetracklesspath.com. So I publish the poem in writing on there every day. If you go to the website, there's a link to subscribe. And if you click on subscribe, then you'll receive a daily email with the blog post with the poem. Now, if you would rather listen to it, I make a recording of it, of me reading it. And you can listen to that on YouTube, and you can subscribe at The Trackless Path, is the name of the channel. You can also subscribe on TikTok. I'm pretty sure it's The Trackless Path. Here, you know what? I bet you if you just type in The Trackless Path on YouTube or on TikTok, you'll find it. My name's Jonathan McCormick. I don't know if that helps. And then I also upload it to a podcast. So if you go to wherever you can download podcasts, you can get the recording every day. It's probably the shortest podcast in existence. It's like 1 minute to 3 minutes long every day. And I'd also encourage people to, if you'd like to read some of the longer pieces of fiction and nonfiction that I've written, you can go to thetracklesspath.com. And I think I have it under books or books and etc., something like that. And what I've been doing lately is just trying to make everything available for free. You can also buy, one of my books is on Amazon, but I've decided it's too much work to try to put books together, the actual formatting and all that. So I'm just trying to write and put it on the website. And if a publisher approaches me someday, then maybe there'll be more in writing. We'll see. Actually, books. But so a couple things that as far as the longer works, there's a short story that I would encourage everybody to go read or listen to. It's on my YouTube channel and it's on my website. It's called Over a Cosmic Apocalypse. And it's only 2,500 words long. So, I mean, you can read it in 8 minutes, something like that. No, it's more than that. It's about 15 minutes. And it's also recorded on my YouTube channel. You can type in A Cosmic Apocalypse and then The Trackless Path, and it'll probably bring it up. You'd enjoy that. There's also another book I wrote that's on the books section, a little book I wrote in 2016 called The Parable of the Talents. And there's a few other things on there. Yeah, and the other thing too, so I'm giving everybody too many things, but one last thing. If you go to the website and you subscribe, there's 2 options. You can receive the daily poems, or you can just receive an update when I publish something like in longer form. And I'm hoping in the next year to have a novel-length piece of writing published. I'm praying that it actually finishes itself. And I'm enjoying the story. I like it. I think it's going to be a good story. But I got to keep it a secret because you can't let it out of the bag till it's done. The point being is that if you don't want to receive the daily stuff, if you put on there, just the periodic updates, then you'll be notified when my book comes out. And that's how they can get a hold of me. So
Great. Thank you so much. And I will try to get some of those links in the description below the video when I post it so that they can more easily find you as well. And I'll get obviously this video link to you so that you can share it and follow it and answer questions in the comments if there are any. So one question I have for you is, how has this journey with Christ changed your heart?
That's a good question. An interesting question because of what it kind of denotes. It's like before this journey, and when I'm saying the journey, I mean our whole life is a journey, but I'm considering what happened to me in my mid-30s and since. So I told you when I was 15, I went through kind of a repentance process. I repented of some things in my life, and the light of Christ dawned upon me. And since that time, I've always loved God, but especially since that time, I've walked seeking Him in those years thereafter. When this happened in my 30s, it felt like in a lot of ways like I had increased, though I was walking with Him before, it was like my life really became like walking with Him. And surprisingly, what it feels like is it didn't make me necessarily a better person. I mean, He has been refining me. Like I don't have I notice old faults falling away, like, oh, I don't do that anymore, I'm able to handle this thing better. And that's what I think happens when we walk with Christ. It's like the old things tend to fall away. So I'm grateful for that. But as far as my heart, I would say one major modification that came since this journey, is that it feels like my chest has been like kind of almost, you could say, it felt like in the beginning like it was being ripped open and just spread wider and wider and wider and wider, this big massive gaping hole. And what it feels like now is it's like it's reaching out and surrounding the world. It's like I used to think that I had a people. I used to think in terms of my family, my tribe, my religion, my this, my that. And it's like now the way that it feels is like my heart is increasingly being wrapped around more and more and more and more kinds of people. It's like I it's like a small little congregation or a little family, it's like, yes, I cherish those things, but it's like, I don't think I realized how much the heart of Christ I'm not describing it well, but that it
expands to
it wraps
encompass.
itself around the whole world. Go ahead.
I was just saying, expands to encompass the world. That's all.
Yep. So that would be the main change, I think.
That's a really interesting way to explain it. I have felt similarly, but with a very different perspective of like words I would use to describe it. I've often lately tried to explain that I feel that what God is trying to teach us through the different things He asks us to do in this life is to teach us to love people, all people, because to be like Him is to love all people. He loves us all wherever we're at, not because we're perfect, not because we've never done anything that maybe wasn't the most pleasing to Him, He'd hope we could learn from and maybe choose to not do again. But the love that He has in His heart for us all is a thing that we don't understand until we start stepping into that space of learning from Him. At least that's my experience. And this unconditional love that He's invited me to feel and to be a part of. I feel like I'm supposed to share this again. I think I've shared it before. Once I was sitting in this grove of trees by myself, and it was towards the end of my marriage, and I was trying to figure out how to help it not fall apart, how to keep us together, and how to be better for our marriage and to not lose that. And as I was sitting in this grove of trees, he asked me to just look around. He's like, what do you see? And there was all these leaves on the ground. And I remember thinking, oh, well, I see all these leaves on the ground. And he said, so he pointed out that, he pointed out the life cycle of a tree, of many trees. Obviously, there's some that don't lose their leaves at all, right? They're evergreen. But he said, the trees that these leaves came from, they, in the spring, they grow leaves, and then in the fall, they shed them, and it leaves the trunk bare. And he said that our life is like this tree, that we start with this bare trunk, this bare tree, like in the spring. Well, like in the winter, I guess. And then things happen to us, and we start creating these leaves that are almost like walls that protect our trunk, our hearts, from the pain of those experiences. And we put up all these walls, and we have all these feelings we hold on to, and we're covered in these leaves that protect the trunk, our heart. And he said, we're meant to shed those things. Just like this tree sheds its leaves yearly, we are meant to shed those walls we put up in our hearts that keep us separate from other people. We're meant to shed those walls. He said, so he taught me a few things, right? So he teaches me, we're supposed to shed those things, and we don't always, but we're meant to. And so it's important to look at these things and try to shed those leaves, so we're not building these walls between the people. He said, but also, he pointed something out to me, and he said, I don't have any leaves, Sarah. Because he's unafraid. There's a song called The Reckless Love of God. And it was during this time that he was teaching me these things that I was really drawn to this song, and I would listen to it regularly, because in that song, he's saying he's reckless in loving us. He doesn't, as human beings, we sometimes are afraid to love fully. We are afraid to love to the extent that we desire to love someone, because we don't know how they're going to respond. We don't know how it's going to be received. We don't know the result of that and how it's going to come back to us. And sometimes we're afraid. And so we choose to live small, right? We choose to love small because of that fear. And because of all the pain we've experienced in the past at times as well. And he's like, I don't have leaves, Sarah. I love with just fully. I love without the fear of getting hurt. The reckless love of God, he continues to love us, even if we push him away, even if I don't care about God and I don't believe in him. Like, he still loves all of those people that say those things to him. He loves us with this recklessness, because he's not concerned about his heart, because his heart is always sharing that love, is full of that love. My computer's low battery. I gotta plug it in. And I would just say that's what he was asking. That's what he's asking of us. In the end, he's asking us to love without walls, without the leaves that hinder us and leave us afraid, and those things that we've put up between our ability to love fully and freely. and that is that unconditional love that he wants us to be able to see each other with and to live in.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that describes it, right?
It seems that it's a lesson that he's teaching many people. And I've heard again and again as I've had these conversations with others who are also seeking him. And I can say that my heart has gone through a process of expanding as well and softening. And one thing he's frequently said to me is be like the willow bending with the wind, you know. And I think there is a lot of rigidity, I guess, that comes with the fear and the anxieties of the world. And there is a much more free-flowing movement and love and light in my life now, as I've learned to hear his voice and to learn at his feet. So thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else that you feel inspired to share before we finish up today?
No, I really have enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to listening to it again once I get the link, and yeah, so really grateful to be able to reach out or to do out there, but yeah, it feels like a blessing. So.
And I do still feel like I should have you send us off with a poem. Is there one really? That you share? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let me see if I can let me do it this way. I'll connect my computer so that I can look it up on my computer and still look at you guys, not look it up on my phone.
Sounds good. And I do want to say thank you for having the courage to walk this path with the Lord and to continue to rise and keep walking, and for being willing to raise your voice.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. And I'm grateful to you too. I'm grateful. I get the feeling that I believe more and more that we chose more than we realized when we came here. And whenever I see somebody who's gone through hardship, it's like, so as I see you talk about the struggles you've been through with your divorce, it's like, I know that has made you what you're becoming now. So, and that's beautiful. So anyway.
Yeah, it wasn't beautiful to live through, but I can look back on it and see the beauty now, which I'm so grateful for because God's shown me the beauty. Yeah. And I wouldn't have been able to see it on my own. I didn't see it on my own. You know, during the time, I thought I called it my own personal hell on earth. And I wondered if God thought it was funny to make me miserable. Like literally, I was just kind of getting sick of it. And I was just getting I was getting very discouraged, wondering if that's what my life was meant for, you know, just misery. And that sounds really dramatic, but when you go through something so devastating, you reach lows you never knew you had. And through that, and through the humility that I experienced in those lows, I learned the most beautiful things that I'm so grateful for now. And so I can look back on it now and go, oh, that's what he was doing. I see. Thank you. Thank you for having the courage to stand by me in those hard times and be still and hold space for me people talk about holding space for others' emotions. And the Lord really held space for me to experience it, to be in the depths of pain that I was in, and to allow me to walk through it and process through it. And he helped me with the words I needed each step of the way. And yet I chose to keep turning to him, and I chose to rise. I chose to have faith. And he held space for the journey, even in its pain. He didn't come save me in it. He allowed it to be what it needed to be so that I could have that experience. And I can see the beauty in it now, and it wasn't beautiful at the time by any means. But it really is beautiful now to look back on and think, and to see what God was doing. It's incredible to see what God was doing for me. So.
Yeah, thanks. And it makes me think that if he's holding space for us, that he must be holding space for people that we wouldn't expect. It's like, we see the real villains in this life and we think, yeah, that's bad, but it's like, what will they be once they turn back to Christ? Like, it's like the alcoholic who turns around and then saves all these alcoholics, through the Alcoholics Anonymous program or something. It's like, he's holding space so we can have that. And what those experiences do is they drive us deeper into his heart. So, I'll read a couple of short ones. I could try to go back and find the most profound, but I'm just going to read a couple of recent ones, to give everybody a taste. So, because otherwise I'll probably get lost. There's too many. So I wrote this one last night, and it came out today. To give some context, I've been doing cement work, which is, if nobody knows, is really hard. It's like the heaviest job, and I'm not a big guy. I'm like 145 pounds, dripping wet, maybe 150 now. But anyways, taking on with the Tongans, it's this Tongan family that I work with. I've taken on with some Tongans laying down cement, and I like it. Long hours and heavy work in the wet Missouri heat. And when we're done, we eat and eat. They feed me every day. There is a kind-heartedness about them, a purity and generosity that the world is missing. And it's all about the family, the ties of Father Abraham. And the branches have reached over the wall to me, as if for this little stint of my life I am one of them, adopted into the very center of the love of the old patriarch himself. Here's one I liked. Wrote this one last week. Her back door. This is one that I just looked out and tried to find something, and I looked out of this window and saw a back door that exited out onto a rooftop. So her back door opens out onto the rooftop, and of an evening she steps out of this world and into the otherworldly light that can only be found on rooftops. And she keeps it a secret, lest her neighbors suggest that she entertain them there. But one day she thinks that she will share it with someone special. Until then, it is her private portal, her sacred chamber, her hidden temple. And yet I see her there from across the way and avert my eyes from the sacred place, pretending not to notice. Okay, and one more. I liked this one too. This was the one from the day before. A conversation with an angel. It's kind of in the spirit of this journey we're talking about that leads out of everything we know. I think a lot of people, when I wrote it, thought I was talking about death. I wasn't talking about death. But when God calls our name and it's time to follow him. So come on, let's go. Where? Out of all you know. Why? Because it's over. Why? I don't know. But I have bills to pay. I know. And a mortgage, a career, and dreams, and people who rely on me to negotiate our little piece of hell. I know. But it's over. Let's go. So there's a little piece from few pieces from the last week.
Well, thank you for sharing. Sounds like they're good ponderings, things to ponder on in here. I appreciate your perspective and what you've shared with us today. Thank you so much for being here again.
God bless.
Tune in next week as Sarah is being interviewed on how she can speak with those beyond the veil of this life.
Thank you for being here, and don't forget to subscribe. God bless.